All right, everyone, it's time to talk about real prosperity, how I would reform the U.S. economy and social system. Since you got a bunch of people on the left and they're like, we need to change the system, it's not working for people. Yeah, that's definitely the case for a lot of people, unfortunately. Like, they want to raise the minimum wage without realizing what this would do is take people who are making more than minimum wage now and shove them down. Naturally, their wages would have to rise accordingly, and the cost of goods would just rise, and ultimately it would have accomplished goddamn jack shit except to hyperinflate the currency and make it more worthless than it already is. Great for trading, as long as you're an exporter, which we've got our own problems on that as well. But here are my suggestions, none of which have to do with communism, aka UBI, again, a way to compact all the people at the bottom together, destroying the lower middle class especially, and completely dispossessing them of everything that they've worked hard for. What I would do is mainly deregulate. But you got to do it in the bureaucratic sense. Like, I don't mean just like, repeal useless regulations on business. That helps. Trump's been doing that. Why do you think we're not in a depression right now? Had Trump not spent the last few years making U.S. businesses more profitable so that they could operate more easily and reducing people's taxes so that maybe they had a few pennies to their name, we'd be in a depression, not a recession right now. I fully believe that. Had Hillary won the presidency, if we hadn't had a blistering nuclear war with Russia already, because she's a complete war pig, a war hog, you could say, looks like one too, that we'd be in a depression. One thing, though, you gotta compact and streamline the bureaucratic process. One of the biggest expenses that we have at this point is, like, you got a situation. And if you've ever watched the movie Brazil, it's a very good 80s dystopian film, and you should definitely check it out, by the way. It's, I believe, British, a little bit of dry humor, therefore, in it, and a lot of sarcasm. It doesn't have a happy ending, let's just put it that way. No spoiler alert needed. What happens is, like, let's say that you want to get a license to fly a kite. You're in a heavily bureaucratized state. You have to do paperwork and licensing and shit and talk to a million different people because you'll have the kite bureau, you'll have the flying things bureau, you'll have the string bureau, you'll have the Bureau of Plastic Regulatory Systems, and you'll have like 4 or 5 different bureaus that technically have overlapping jurisdiction over the same basic thing. It doesn't make sense. This is why our legal code would fill this entire apartment several times over. You could never understand it all. Why do you think that you don't just have lawyers? You used to 100 years ago. Now you have personal injury lawyers, elder law, you have marriage lawyers, you have tax code law. You have like 20, 30 different kinds of lawyers for this reason. You've got a convolution that makes absolutely no sense. What I would do is look at all of these bureaus and regulatory bodies, and I would say, okay, first and foremost, we're getting rid of any that we don't need. For those that we need, we have to ask, do we need them to operate at their current budget, or can we reduce it? Some cases, you would probably want to increase it. NASA. Yeah, by the way, yeah, okay, I'm a little bit of a space cadet. Sorry about that. I know it's anti-libertarian, but I'm a 90s kid. We all love space. Fuck it. And by the way, I want more genetic research because I want to bring dinosaurs back. All right, I watched Jurassic Park once, and, I never got off the pipe dream. Those that you can shrink, those that, you need them, but maybe they can be handled at the state level more efficiently. Usually states are going to be a little bit more efficient, or they can be privatized potentially. It's a function that needs to happen, but the government doesn't need to be the one providing it. If you impose this, it's like here in the Netherlands, one of the ways they shrank some of their costs is they combined a bunch of municipalities and stuff like that in order to decrease their bureaus. And it worked. I mean, to the extent that a far-left, high-tax nation is capable of shrinking its regulatory body, I guess, better than nothing. In the United States, it should be simple. But we've got the most complex bureaucracy of all. It's interesting how the land of the free, home of the brave, with capitalism and apple pie is actually the most strangulated by these things. Now, it doesn't need to be. We could probably reduce the total government budget by 20-30%. Yes, that includes cuts to the military. Simply because you can make it more efficient. If it's lower, if the cost is lower, then it doesn't need as much of a budget now, does it? Of course, bureaus tend to grow over time. States tend to get larger, more bloated, and eventually they collapse themselves in many cases because of this. It's for the necessity of the United States continuing to be a major player in the world that we need to do this. Secondly is simple tax code. Now this is sort of a no-brainer. I think everyone wants to change the tax code. Those that make money often want to reduce taxes. It's interesting how that works. Having risen up into the middle class, what happens is, I used to think that people that made, like, they made a good amount of money, but not like huge amounts like I do, people like me that are in that sort of average range of income, I never expected that they got hit as hard as I get hit on taxes. I never expected the tax rate that I have to pay. When I first saw it, it's a good thing that I believe in being frugal to some extent and saving money, because otherwise I would have been fucked several years ago. When I first started making a reasonable amount of money, especially as an entrepreneur, it's interesting how high the tax rate actually is on the middle class. Nobody in the middle class should be paying, the 20-30% of their income. It doesn't make any fucking goddamn sense. And they disincentivize entrepreneurs. What you need to do with the business tax code is you lower it, and then you close the loopholes that allow the big corporations to skate and pay nothing. As if they were paying a rate of 3 or 4% instead of 0, you could make up for all the money you'd lose if you took all the ma and pa and regional chain stores and cut their taxes in half. The cost of goods would drop considerably. Ma and pa stores would be solvent. They would proliferate. People would open businesses. They'd be incentivized to take initiative. Downtowns throughout the country would get beefier. The box stores would slowly lose some of their market share. I don't think they'd be going out of business, but the sprawl would stop. Environmentalists should love the idea. Instead of box stores, you have nice little, neat little downtowns with window boxes and community gardens. Isn't that sort of like a leftist hipster fantasy? You can accomplish that by lowering the business tax rate and simply closing the loopholes. But of course, they want everyone to pay more. They don't care about ma and pa stores. What about farms? We throw huge amounts of money to make farms solvent. We don't really need to do that. The government micro-regulates everything the farmers do. The idea of, I'm going to go out and own my own land and grow my corn. Well, you might not be able to sell your corn. You might have to let some of your land go fallow. By law, you might be forced to plant soybeans instead. Maybe your soil is a little tainted, so you're not organic because somebody dumped a little Miracle-Gro 10 years ago. See all the fucking problems? It doesn't really make sense. It's a hyper-regulatory society. And just think, unless you go out into the depths of the deep third world and you're in some rural village out in Rwanda or something, you live this way. There aren't many places in the world that aren't hyper-regulated, and those that aren't, they're usually so anarchic that it doesn't really matter because it's literal mob rule. Whoever has the biggest gun is the one that runs the show and can, rape you at his leisure. And it's, usually a man, unless it's like some Amazon warrior. It's like Xena, warrior princess or something. Sorry, my inner 90s kid getting channeled today, I suppose. But yeah, streamline the government and deregulating things at the business level is a good thing. Like the fact that Trump has gone on a deregulatory spree, I think is great. I wish he would redouble it more. I wish we'd get tax cuts 2.0. That's what we really need. Instead of throwing funny money at people, just allow them to keep more of their money, and those that make good choices, those that make good decisions, will tend to rise above, and they'll tend to create better industries, they'll innovate, they'll invent things, and improve society. It's very meritocratic, capitalism. I believe in social Darwinism. I don't think that you want to let poor people starve and die and all these things, but I think we should incentivize meritocratic behavior. Those that have succeeded, that have shown they can do it, should be rewarded for doing so, not be punished. People who have done well, especially if you've managed to do well through the fucking filth of government, the wall after wall, hurdle after hurdle that you have to scale and climb and jump over in order to get anywhere. If you've managed to rise up a rung or two economically, I think that's wonderful. I had to take initiative. I had to do it all myself. Nobody was teaching me how to edit books. Nobody was teaching me how to make YouTube videos. It's very meritocratic. The internet's the last bastion of what amounts to true capitalism really in the world. Why do you think they're constantly trying to regulate and tax it? They don't want people to get ahead. Because when you get ahead, when you exempt yourself from slavery, you might start getting politically empowered. Because if you have leisure, if you have fuck you money or something like that, like some dude, he makes 7 figures, he invests it well, he becomes rich, they have to try to corrupt him and gobble them up. Otherwise, oh my God, they might make an independent run for office. They might use their money to promote change that we don't want. They might start empowering their local community with decentralized solar systems and scary things like that. They won't. We'll have to pay them per megawatt hour. Oh my God. They might form syndicates. They might form trade unions or something. This is the sort of thing that they worry about. Globalism hates the idea of empowered people. They want a public worldwide that is homogenized, disarmed, not at liberty to speak, not at liberty to travel freely. It's almost like they use every opportunity as an excuse, by the way, to try to push this line. Wonder why that happens. I'm sure it's very benevolent that everyone has to wear a mask and stay home all the time now. That's about all. Peace out.